She
Shut
dressed
your
him
mouth!
down in front of
You're
the entire
fired!
crew, thinking he was just another guy in dirty boots, until he calmly revealed he was the new CEO and fired her on the spot. It was already 89 degrees by 9 a.m. when Kelsey Durant stepped out of her trailer and scanned the construction site in Chandler, Arizona. The desert sun was sharp, bouncing off steel beams and half-poured concrete like it had something to prove. She tugged her hard hat lower and squinted at the crew, then stopped. There was someone she didn't recognize. Tall, black, maybe in his late 40s, dressed in a plain navy hoodie, jeans stained with dust, and work boots that had definitely seen more than one job. He wasn't holding blueprints. He wasn't carrying gear. And he wasn't wearing a badge. Kelsey didn't like what she saw. She marched across the gravel, weaving past rebar and wheelbarrows until she was directly in front of him. "Hey," she snapped. "You lost." The man looked up slowly. His face was calm, unreadable. "No," she crossed her arms. "Then what are you doing walking around my site like you belong here?" "I'm just observing," he said. His voice was low but clear to no irritation, no apology. Just. That threw her off slightly. Observing what exactly? Process, communication, safety habits. Kelsey narrowed her eyes. "Well, unless you've got a hard hat and a reason to be here, I'm gonna have to ask you to leave." "I'm not in the way." "Doesn't matter. This isn't a sightseeing tour." "Who gave you clearance?" He shrugged. "Nobody. I walked in with the morning shift." "You just walked in?" Her voice rose. "Do you have any idea what kind of insurance nightmare that could be?" "Jesus. What's your name?" "Miles." "Miles what?" "Trenholm." She didn't recognize IT meant nothing to her. Another guy without a vest, probably looking for work or trying to snoop for a subcontractor. That happens sometimes. People pretending to be curious just to copy bids. "Well, Miles," she said, drawing out the name like it tasted bad. "You've got 30 seconds to head back toward the gate before I call site security." Still, he didn't move. He looked over her shoulder at the scaffold beams above them, the half-installed piping, the two men arguing near the lift controls. "Your welder's using the wrong torch head. Could cause a compression split." She blinked. "Excuse me? I saw him earlier. He's using an H31 fine, not a 43-2. Won't hold under temperature variance." Now that caught her attention. Her mouth twitched before she caught it. "Who told you that?" "Nobody. It's just not what's in the plans." He pulled a folded paper from his back pocket. "Site blueprints, annotated and highlighted." Kelsey snatched it from him and gave it a quick scan. "IT was their plan set. Exact version. Right margins. IT even had her initials." "Where did you get this?" she asked. Miles smiled slightly. "Same place you did." There was a pause. A long one. Long enough for the crew nearby to pretend they weren't listening while stealing glances. Long enough for the foreman, Ellis Granger, to step toward them before deciding better of it. Kelsey let out a breath through her nose. "Fine. If you're going to wander around quoting specs, at least throw on a vest so people stop thinking you're trespassing." "I'm not worried about what they think," he said. "Well, you should be. This is a job site, not a damn classroom." Miles just looked at her like she'd said something mildly amusing. Then he walked off without another word, heading toward the west end of the site where the foundation crew was prepping concrete. She watched him go. Something about the way he moved bugged her, not because he was slow or careless. The opposite, really. He walked like someone who had nothing to prove. That annoyed her more than she wanted to admit. Back in her trailer, she made a quick call to check the gate locks. No Miles Trenholm signed IN.NO delivery under that name. No safety badge issued. Nothing. So who the hell was he? But something about the way the crew had watched told her this wasn't over. The sun climbed higher, dragging the temperature with it. Heat shimmered over the steel framework, and the usual hum of the site picked up again. Kelsey moved through it with practiced authority, barking orders, checking progress, pausing to nitpick when things weren't aligned to her liking. She didn't see Miles for the next hour, and that was fine by her, until she heard someone ask, "You the new inspector?" It was one of the young plumbers. Troy, barely out of trade school. His voice carried just enough for her to catch it as she stepped out from behind a container. She turned and saw Miles again, standing near the west trench, pointing at the pump layout while Troy looked on. She stormed toward them. "Troy," she snapped. "You're on clock. Why are you standing around?" "I was just asking. He's not your supervisor, and he's not cleared to be talking about pump flow rates. So maybe save the technical talk for someone with a license, yeah?" Troy flushed and nodded. mumbling something as he grabbed his gear and walked off. Kelsey turned her eyes on Miles. You just can't help yourself, can you? I didn't tell him anything dangerous, just asked why the trench was angled against grade. She took a deep breath, held it, then released it slowly. I don't know who you think you are, that I told you already. Miles Trenholm. Right, Miles Trenholm. Observer. Blueprint whisperer, construction guru. She let the sarcasm coat every word. We don't need advice from random guys in hoodies. Then maybe you should ask yourself why I know more about your site than your junior engineers. The line was calm. Too calm. Kelsey stiffened. You know what? She said. Come with me to. He followed her to the center of the site, where a few dozen crew members were rotating shifts. Perfect timing. She walked them both right into the middle of a busy loading area. She turned to face him, raised her voice just enough to make sure others heard. Everyone, this here's Miles. He thinks he's got all the answers. Some guys looked up. A few of the older hands exchanged a look, but stayed quiet. This guy's been wandering around, handing out opinions like he owns the place, she continued. Problem is, he doesn't. He's not cleared. He's not certified, he's not anything. Just a guy in boots who thinks knowing part numbers makes him qualified to run a site. Miles said nothing. He stood there, arms loose at his sides, eyes steady. You know what we do with people like that? She asked. Someone in the back muttered, give him a vest? A few chuckles. Not many. She ignored it. We ignore them and get back to work. Because people who actually build things, we don't need show-offs. We need doers. There it was. The line she was hoping would land harder than it did. Miles looked at her, then glanced around the crowd. I didn't come here to show off, he said. I came to see how people are treated when they don't wear a name tag. That quieted the last few snickers. Kelsey felt her jaw clench. You done playing riddles? He gave a slight nod. For now. She spun on her heel and walked away before she let the heat show. But inside she was seething. The nerve of this guy, wandering around like he belonged, dropping passive-aggressive lines in front of her crew. She called Ellis, the foreman, to her trailer. Who the hell is this Miles guy? She demanded the second he walked in. Ellis looked uncomfortable. I don't know. He walked in this morning. Thought maybe he was with corporate, or he isn't. And he needs to go. I can ask around. Don't ask. Find out. If he's on this site one more hour without a damn title next to his name, it's on you. Ellis nodded stiffly and left. She sat back in her chair, heart pounding harder than it should have been. But something about the way Miles never flinched made her wonder if she'd just played the wrong card. The clock ticked past noon. Workers broke into groups near the food trucks, wiping sweat from their necks, trading stories in shaded corners behind trailers. Lunch breaks on site weren't sacred, but they were close. You didn't interrupt a man mid-bite unless something was on fire. Kelsey sat alone in her trailer, poking at a sad chicken salad while refreshing her inbox. Still no response from HQ, no badge under Miles Trenholm. No recent hire paperwork. She opened the company directory and ran the name. Through the internal database. Nothing. She was halfway through an angry email to upper management when she glanced at the camera feed for Lot B. There he was again, sitting on a stack of concrete slabs, eating a peanut butter sandwich like he'd packed it from home. No phone in hand, no notebook, just watching. It rattled her. He didn't behave like someone caught in the wrong place. He didn't seem nervous or eager to explain himself. Most people in his position would have made excuses by now, pulled a name dropped to contact, anything to avoid being thrown out. But not him. Out on the slab, Jacob, a first-year apprentice, walked over, holding a Gatorade bottle and a bag of chips. He offered both to Miles, who shook his head, smiled faintly, and thanked him anyway. Everyone's talking about you, Jacob said, sitting down cross-legged. I figured, Miles replied. So, who are you really? Miles paused. Just someone who likes to see things for himself. You don't look like a laborer. I've done my share, Jacob squinted at him. Yeah, but you talk different. Miles grinned. How's that? Like you already know the answers. Miles didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked out toward the unfinished beams. What do you think about this site? Jacob shrugged, kind of disorganized. People talk behind each other's backs. Kelsey's smart, but she's rough, real rough. Miles didn't ask him to explain. He didn't need to. Jacob leaned back on his elbows. She's like, always proving something, you know? Sometimes that comes from fear. Miles said, fear of what? Losing control. Being underestimated. Or maybe, someone finding out she's not as sure as she pretends. Jacob didn't know what to say to that. He just sat there for a while, the silence between them more comfortable than expected. Miles stood eventually. Thanks for the company. You leaving? Not yet. Kelsey watched the conversation play out on the feed. She couldn't hear them, but their body language was too friendly for her liking. That was the problem with these younger guys. No instinct for hierarchy. No filter. She radioed Ellis. Have you found out anything about our mystery guest? Still working on it. No one wants to touch it. What do you mean? Ellis lowered his voice. There's talk that he might be with corporate. That's why no one's pressing. Based on what? Just the way he's watching everything. He's not taking notes, but he notices things, like real small stuff. Like a safety auditor would. Kelsey's grip on the radio tightened. No one at HQ said anything. I've got no alerts. No internal memos. You tell your guys to stop speculating and stay focused. Understood. She clicked off and stood. Outside, she spotted Miles again. This time standing near the steel hoist area, watching two men unload angle bars. He wasn't in the way, but his presence was starting to feel heavier, like a weight hanging behind every conversation. The crew was noticing too. She could feel it. People whispered more. Eyes shifted her way when she walked past. Everyone was wondering the same thing. Who is this man? But no one asked out loud, because deep down, they were starting to suspect the answer might be bigger than they were ready for. By mid-afternoon, the air above the asphalt shimmered like glass, and tempers were as short as the sleeves rolled up across the crew. Concrete was being poured on the north slab. The steel team was behind schedule, and one of the supply trucks was stalled outside the gate because someone forgot to log it in. Kelsey moved through the site like a match looking for dry brush. She spotted a crewman using a grinder near the eastern scaffolding, sparks flying too close to the gas line. Cody, she shouted, cutting across the dirt. You trying to cook us all alive? The guy flinched. I'm just grinding down the edge. No, not next to that piping. Shut it down. He dropped the grinder, yanked his goggles off, and stepped back. Kelsey turned to grab the safety manual from the toolbox nearby, but before she could say another word, a voice behind her cut in. You've got the wrong concern. She spun around. There he was again. Miles, what? He pointed to the junction box near the foot of the scaffold. The breaker's live. That line should have been shut off before anyone got close. Kelsey narrowed her eyes. You're just wandering the site now? I've been here since morning. Didn't hide. That doesn't mean you're allowed to intervene. He didn't back down. Someone had to. Your foreman's busy rerouting the crane load, and your assistant's on the phone with the city. I don't need a babysitter. No, he said. You need to see what everyone else already does. She felt that like a slap. It wasn't what he said. It was how steady his voice stayed. Like this wasn't about her at all. Just the truth, hanging there between them, untouched and cold. You want to keep calling people out, she snapped. Fine. You want to walk the walk? Then tell me. What would you do differently? Miles didn't hesitate. I'd run quieter safety drills. Rotate site leads to build trust. And maybe stop humiliating people when the cameras are off. The silence was immediate, not heavy, just sharp. A few crew members nearby stopped what they were doing. One of them, Leo, a quiet, older electrician, leaned on his ladder and looked between them. Kelsey's face flushed red, heat pouring into her neck. Who the hell do you think you are? Someone who used to be ignored, Miles said. Someone who remembers what it felt like to be looked through instead of looked at. She laughed once. Loud. Fake. You've got some nerve. He didn't flinch. I don't need nerve, just patience. The silence stretched again. Then Ellis appeared from the south path, wiping his hands on his vest. Kelsey, he said, loud enough for the nearby group to hear. There's a mandatory safety meeting at 3. Everyone's expected. I didn't schedule any meeting, she muttered. It's not from you. She raised an eyebrow. Then who's calling it? Ellis didn't answer. He just nodded slightly toward Miles, then walked away. Kelsey turned slowly. Miles was already walking back toward the loading area, not bothering to explain anything, just moving like someone who'd already decided how this day would end. She stood there for a moment, surrounded by workers who were no longer pretending not to stare. Inside, her stomach twisted, not with guilt. Not yet. But something else, something colder. Something that said, you've miscalculated. And there's no fixing it now, but she still thought she could control the story. Right up until the moment she couldn't. At exactly 2:58 p.m., the sharp screech of a whistle cut across the site. That it wasn't the usual end-of-shift warning. This was deliberate. 3 short blasts. Everyone knew what it meant. Drop tools, move to the meeting zone. No exceptions. Kelsey stepped out of her trailer, heart thudding in her chest. The sun had shifted behind a stack of girders, casting a long shadow across the assembly zone. Workers filed in, some still in gloves, others wiping their faces with shirts soaked in sweat. It wasn't often they were all called together like this. Not during work hours. Ellis stood at the front, next to a portable table. On it sat a single clipboard, a water bottle, and a folded hoodie. That same navy hoodie. Kelsey's eyes locked onto it. Her mouth went dry. Then, from behind the crowd, Miles walked forward. Not rushed, not hesitant, just calm. Like this had always been the plan. He reached the table, looked out at the workers gathered, easily 50 of them, and paused. People expected someone else to start speaking. Maybe Ellis, maybe someone from safety. Instead, Miles reached for the clipboard, flipped a page, and spoke. My name is Miles Trenholm, I'm the new CEO of Trenholm Keating Group. You could have heard a nail drop. Even the wind seemed to pause. A few heads jerked around to look at Kelsey. She didn't blink. Miles continued, voice low, but clear. I've been with the company for less than a month, and I wanted to understand how things actually worked, not on paper, not in meetings, but out here, where the real work happens. People were still frozen. Some looked stunned. Others turned to whisper to the person beside them. A few stared at Kelsey, waiting for her to react. She didn't move. Miles looked across the crowd again. I didn't announce myself because I wanted to see how our sites operate when no one's watching. How foremen lead, how engineers interact, how crews are treated. He paused. I saw a lot of good, smart workers, careful builds, people helping each other without being asked. Then he turned slightly, not facing Kelsey directly, but close enough that everyone knew who he meant. But I also saw something else. A culture where arrogance gets mistaken for authority, where talking down is considered leadership, where people are spoken to like they don't matter unless they wear the right badge or carry the right title. Kelsey's hands were in fists. She hadn't realized it until now. Miles went on. I was interrupted, insulted, mocked. That's fine. I can take it. But what matters more is that it wasn't just directed at me. I watched it happen to others. In small ways. In ways people stop noticing after a while, until they forget it's not normal. One moved. Then Miles turned fully toward her. Ms. Duran. Her name hit like a hammer. Short. Final. You've got the credentials, the experience, the discipline. But what you're missing, what you've chosen to ignore, is the people you work with. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. They aren't below you. They're beside you. Or they should be. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. So as of today, he continued, your employment with Trenholm Keating is terminated. He said it like a line item. Clean, without a trace of anger. Gasps moved through the crowd. A couple of guys looked at each other in disbelief. One woman covered her mouth with her glove. Kelsey blinked rapidly. You can't. You didn't even tell me who you were. I didn't need to. Respect isn't supposed to be conditional. That silenced her. Miles stepped back. Meeting adjourned. Everyone. Get water. Take 10. Then finish strong. People hesitated, unsure if they were really dismissed. Then one by one, they moved. Quietly, slowly, giving Kelsey a wide berth. She didn't leave right away. She stood there, frozen, eyes darting between faces that once avoided her. And now, just looked past her. But the worst part wasn't the firing. It was realizing no one looked surprised. Kelsey didn't walk back to her trailer. She stood there, her boots sunk half an inch in the gravel, staring at the spot where Miles had been just moments ago. People were clearing out, but no one approached her. No one offered a glance, a nod, a word of sympathy, not even Ellis. That stung more than she expected. She finally turned and walked, not fast, not slow, just trying to keep her steps even, back toward her office. Her hands trembled, and she hated that. Hated the feeling of everyone watching her come undone in real time. Inside the trailer, the AC buzzed faintly, but the air still felt hot. She sat down, unsure of what to do next. Call HR? Legal? She reached for her phone, then stopped. There was no point. He'd already done it. And worse, he'd done it in front of everyone. She looked at the company-branded clipboard on her desk. Her name was etched into the back. Duran, in neat block letters that IT used to make her feel like she owned something. Now it just felt small. Out on the site, work resumed. Slowly at first, then steadily. You could hear the buzz of drills, the clang of metal, The voices of men shouting coordinates across the scaffolds. Normal sounds. As if nothing had happened. But something had. People worked with a new energy. A strange quiet settled in. Not fear. Something closer to reflection. Ellis stood near the generator bay, arms folded. He wasn't talking to anyone. Just watching. A few of the crew approached him cautiously, asking short questions, whispering. He gave nods, not of command, but of understanding. Later, in the shade under one of the trailers, two welders talked in hushed voices. "You ever seen anything like that?" One asked. "Never." The other replied. "Not in front of everyone like that." "Think he planned it?" "Had to." They looked around, making sure no one was close enough to hear. "Think she'll fight it?" "Maybe. But does it matter?" "No," the first one said. "Not after that." Across the site, Jacob leaned against a support beam, sipping a Gatorade. Watching the crew work, he hadn't said a word since the meeting ended, but his eyes hadn't stopped moving. He caught every glance, every whispered conversation, every subtle shift. Miles walked past him, this time in a company vest, still wearing jeans, still calm. "You really fired her like that?" Jacob asked. Miles didn't break stride. No one learns from private consequences. They only remember the public ones. That was cold. It was necessary. Jacob followed him for a few steps. She wasn't wrong about everything. Just rough. Miles stopped. Being right doesn't give you the right to humiliate people. Jacob nodded slowly. "She'll land somewhere." Miles added, "But maybe next time she'll listen before she talks." Inside the trailer, Kelsey sat at her desk with the blinds closed. She stared at the blank screen in front of her, her finger hovering over the keyboard. For the first time in a long time, she didn't know what to type. She kept thinking about the look in his eyes when he said her name. Not angry, not smug, just final. She remembered how people looked at her afterward. Not angry, just relieved. And she realized something she didn't want to admit. They hadn't respected her, they'd just feared her. And now? Now they didn't even do that. But she still hadn't understood just how far the impact would go once word got out. Why the next morning, it was everywhere. No dramatic headlines, no viral videos. Just a slow ripple through email threads, text messages, private group chats, and project manager circles. Site hands from Sacramento to Tampa started hearing whispers. A CEO fired someone on site yesterday. In front of the whole crew. Engineer didn't know who he was. Thought he was a laborer. Then came the first post. A picture. Grainy. Taken from a phone at waist level. Showed a crowd of workers gathered in a dusty lot, with a man in a hoodie standing at the front. No names. Just a short caption. "Respect isn't supposed to be conditional." Miles Trenholm. By noon, the post had passed 1,000 shares. Within 2 days, it had over 50,000. People didn't just share it. They added their own stories. A project lead in Bakersfield wrote, "I once saw a safety officer reduced to tears for asking a basic question. No one spoke up. I didn't either. I still think about that." A female civil engineer from Tulsa added, "It's always about tone. If you're quiet, you're weak. If you speak up, you're difficult." Seeing someone like Miles in charge gives me hope that there's room for better leadership. And then came the interns. One after another, former interns and junior staff from the company started chiming in anonymously. Reddit threads lit up. "I shadowed her for 2 weeks. Kelsey Duran. She made me cry twice. Told me I was wasting her time. She said I wasn't built for this field because I couldn't lift a load of tubing fast enough. I had scoliosis. Didn't tell her, just left. I thought I was the only one." The firm didn't release a statement. They didn't need to. The silence from the official channels only made the chatter louder. Speculation replaced PR. Some questioned Miles' approach. Said it was too public, too harsh. Others defended it, saying it was about time someone in power made accountability visible. On a podcast for construction project management, 2 veteran site managers broke it down. "Would you have fired her that way?" "I don't know. Depends on the damage she caused." "Well, she cost them respect. That's expensive." And all the while, Miles stayed out of the spotlight. No quotes. No interviews. No press tour. Just back to work. Jacob, meanwhile, had a front row seat. He was reassigned to a site in Mesa the following week, and Miles showed up there, too. Still quiet. Still asking questions. Still watching. During one lunch break, Jacob sat next to him again. "You know this thing went viral, right?" Miles looked up from his sandwich. "I heard. You gonna post anything?" "No, why not?" "Because it's not about me." Jacob tilted his head. "Then what was it about?" Miles took a slow breath. then answered, "It's about what people tolerate. And what they stop tolerating once someone says, 'That's enough.'" He took another bite. Then added, "Most of them already knew it wasn't right. They just needed permission to stop pretending it was normal." Jacob sat with that for a while. Then he said that I used to think being tough meant not complaining. It doesn't, Miles said. It means speaking up even when it's hard. Back in Chandler, no one spoke much about Kelsey after that. Her name stopped coming up in morning briefings. Her trailer was cleared out within days. A different engineer took her place. Quieter, but more approachable. Someone who asked questions instead of barking orders. One afternoon, a group of welders sat by the loading bay, sharing cold sodas and shade. "You think she saw it coming?" one asked. "No," another replied. "People like that never do." She wasn't all bad, but she was bad when it counted. But as the weeks went on, it became clear. The real story wasn't about one woman losing her job. It was about everyone else finally remembering their worth. It was a few weeks later when Jacob spotted Miles again, this time standing near the edge of a new build site in Glendale. Same hoodie, same boots, same quiet way of observing everything, like he was taking mental notes no one else could see. Jacob was in charge of site prep now, a big step up from where he'd started just a few months earlier. He hadn't expected to see Miles again, but seeing him there, walking the gravel with a clipboard and nodding to the crew without ever pulling rank, somehow felt right. "You ever take a day off?" Jacob called out with a grin. Miles looked up, smiled. "They still let you talk back like that?" "Only on Thursdays." They walked together for a bit, past a row of survey markers and fresh dig lines. The air was cooler now, fall creeping in. But the energy on this site felt different. People worked with a sense of clarity. Fewer whispers, less tension. More small talk even. So, Jacob said, "You really gonna keep doing this? Showing up like a ghost with a hard hat?" Miles gave a quiet laugh. "Ghosts don't.